I had exactly one rule about my private room at the back of the main house. Nobody went in there. Not my ranch hands, not my housekeeper, Martha, not even my business partner of 12 years. The room was mine. The leather chair by the window was mine. The silence was mine. And the woman who walked through that door on a rainy Thursday afternoon was absolutely, completely, without any question, not supposed to be there. Everyone who worked on this ranch had heard the same warning on their first day. Don't bother Wade Calloway when he's in the back room. Don't knock. Don't slip papers under the door. I had made that rule 15 years ago, and not a single person had broken it. Cold, closed, unapproachable. That was fine by me. So when the door opened that evening, I did not move. I sat in that leather chair and stared and thought, I very calmly, that whoever was standing there was either about to be fired or had lost their mind completely. It was neither. It was a woman I had never seen before in my life, dripping rain onto my hardwood floor, holding a broken umbrella that had clearly lost the fight against the Texas wind, with the most astonishing expression of absolute certainty on her face, like she had every right in the world to be standing exactly where she was. She had warm brown hair stuck to her forehead in wet pieces, dark eyes scanning the room like she was evaluating property, and a canvas backpack hanging from one shoulder that had seen better years. She was wearing a green flannel shirt, 2 sizes too big, and jeans tucked into thoroughly soaked work boots. She looked like someone who had walked 10 miles through a storm on purpose. She looked at me. I looked at her. The rain hit the window behind me. She said, I think I came in the wrong door. And I said nothing, because what do you say to that? She didn't leave. She looked around with those sharp, dark eyes, at the leather chair, at the shelves of worn books, at the framed photographs and the old rodeo belt buckle in the glass case by the door. And she said, This is actually a really nice room. I can see why you keep it to yourself. I had been told I was intimidating. I had fired men twice her size with fewer words than I was using right now, which was 0. And this woman was standing in my private room, complimenting the decor like she'd been invited for coffee. Something happened in my chest that I did not have a name for yet. I said, You need to leave. She said, I know, I'm sorry. I was looking for Mrs. Harmon, the housekeeper. She said she'd leave a key for me at the back of the house, and I think I misunderstood back of the house. I said, Martha left 2 hours ago. She said, Oh. A pause. That explains why every door I tried was locked. I stared at her. She stared back. There was rain in her eyelashes. I said, Who are you? She said, Ellie Pruitt. I'm supposed to be the new kitchen assistant. I started today, except I couldn't find anyone to tell me where to go. Then it started raining, and I walked around the main house 3 times before I found a door that actually opened. Which was this one, and I'm really sorry about the floor. She looked down at the small puddle forming around her boots. I looked at the puddle, then at her, then back at the puddle. I said, Guest quarters are in the east wing. 3rd door on the left. There's a key on the hook inside the door. Dinner is at 7. Don't be late. She said, Thank you. I said, And don't come back in this room. She said, Understood. Then she looked at the belt buckle in the glass case, just for a second, and said, Is that from the Amarillo Rodeo? 1989? I said nothing. She said, My grandfather had one just like it. And then she left. I stood in the middle of my private room for a long time after that. The rain kept hitting the window. The puddle slowly spread across the floor. and I thought, with more irritation than the situation deserved, that Martha and I were going to have a conversation in the morning. If you're enjoying this story, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below. Tell me, would you have stayed or walked right back out of that room? I'll leave a heart on your comment. Martha, as it turned out, was completely unapologetic. She sat across from me at the kitchen island with her coffee and the calm expression of a woman who has been managing large households for 30 years and does not consider herself accountable to anyone. She said Ellie Pruitt came from Abilene, had 3 years of cooking experience, good references, needed the work. She said the girl was 24, hardworking, and quiet. She said, with the specific tone she reserved for final things, that hiring kitchen staff was on her list. I said, "She walked into my private room." Martha said, "She was looking for me. She'd been here 4 hours. It was raining, and every door was locked. You want me to fire her for not knowing a rule nobody told her?" There was a pause. I said, "No." Martha took a sip of her coffee and said nothing else, which was the most aggravating possible response. At noon, coming in from the south pasture, I found Ellie standing on the back porch with a glass of water, looking out at the fields. She was dry now, hair pulled back, wearing a plain white shirt. She was standing very still, the way people do when something is hitting them harder than they expected. The view from the back porch was one I had grown up with. Green fields stretching to a tree line, cattle visible as small shapes in the distance, the sky that particular shade of Texas blue that exists nowhere else on Earth. I had stopped seeing it years ago. She was seeing it. Micah, she had both hands around the glass and her chin slightly lifted, looking like she was trying to memorize it. Then she heard my boots on the steps and said, "Sorry, I was on my break. I'll go back in." I said, "You've got 15 minutes." I almost went inside. Instead, I stood there for a moment. Just a moment. Looking at whatever she was looking at. The fields, the sky, the cattle in the distance. I reckon I had forgotten it was beautiful. The first week passed. She learned the kitchen, the schedule, which hands took their coffee black and which needed enough sugar to fill a boot. She remembered without being told twice. She laughed easily at dinner when the hands told stories. She had a firm opinion about the best way to make biscuits and was not shy about defending it, which led to a debate with Martha that ended with both of them making separate batches for the crew to judge. The crew voted for Ellie's. Martha has not acknowledged this outcome. On Thursday of the second week, I came in from the east fence line to find her in the stable. The stable was not her area. The horses there were working horses, including my own, a big black quarter horse named Garrison, who had thrown 2 experienced riders in the past year, and whom Hank approached every morning with deliberate caution and a carrot. Ellie was standing at Garrison's stall with her hand out, palm up, completely still. Garrison was eating from her palm. I stood at the stable door and did not move for a full 30 seconds. Hank appeared at my elbow with the expression of a man who also did not know what to make of this. He said very quietly, "I've been standing there about 10 minutes. He walked right up to her." She said softly to the horse, "Yeah, I know. It's all a little much, isn't it?" Garrison made a low sound and pushed his nose against her shoulder, and she laughed quietly, and I felt that same unnamed flicker from the first night, except louder this time. I turned around and walked back out before she saw me. The third week became the month. October brought cooler mornings, golden afternoons, and wood smoke drifting from the bunkhouse at night. She settled into the ranch like she had always been part of it. She knew the hands' names, their families, their coffee orders, their birthday months. She remembered things. Small things. The kind that add up. I started finding reasons to be in the kitchen in the mornings that were not strictly necessary. One morning, in the 4th week, she came in before Martha, saw my empty mug, and refilled it without asking. 2 minutes later, she set a plate with 2 biscuits next to my reports and said, "Hank mentioned you don't usually eat before you go out. Those'll keep better if you eat them warm." I looked at the biscuits, then at her, then at the biscuits. I said, "Thank you." She said, "Sure," and went back to her work. The biscuits were perfect. She did it the next morning and the morning after that. I told myself it was just kitchen management, part of the job. I told myself that for about 2 weeks before I admitted, only to myself, quietly, that I had started looking forward to it. I had lived alone on this ranch for 11 years. I had run it well. I had needed nothing the ranch and work didn't provide. I had convinced myself this was enough, that the fullness other men seemed to need was something I had simply outgrown. I'll be honest with you. I was wrong about that. I just didn't know it yet. The moment I really understood it was a Saturday afternoon in mid-October. I had ridden Garrison out to check the northwest property line and was coming back through the south field when I passed the old equipment shed at the corner of the property. She was sitting on the wooden fence by the shed. Not working. Not going somewhere. Just sitting on the fence with her arms on her knees and her face turned up to the afternoon sun. Eyes closed. Completely still. Her hair was loose. The light was that particular late afternoon gold that makes everything look like a painting. Garrison slowed without me asking. I should have kept moving. I had 1,000 things to do, and she was not one of them. But I stopped about 20 feet away and sat there for a moment that was longer than it should have been. She opened her eyes, looked at me, didn't look startled, just looked at me, calm and direct, the same way she had that first night in the back room. She said, "Checking the property line?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "It's nice out here. I didn't know you could see the creek from this fence." I said, "You can see it better from the ridge." She said, "I didn't know there was a ridge." I said, "I'll show you sometime." She looked at me for a second, checking whether I meant it. Then she nodded and said, "I'd like that." I rode back without saying anything else. I went directly to my private room and sat in the leather chair and thought about what I had just said. "I'll show you sometime." I did not show people things. I had not made that kind of offer to another person in longer than I could specifically remember. Something had shifted. I could feel it in the air, in the quality of the light, and I had no interest in shifting it back. The ridge was a long rise at the northwest edge of the property, where you could see everything. The full spread of the ranch, the creek threading silver through the south pasture, the town of Merritt in the distance. My father had brought me here when I was 6 and told me that everything you could see from up here was worth protecting. I had never brought anyone up here who wasn't family. I took her on Sunday. When we came up over the rise, she went quiet in a different way. She pulled her horse to a stop at the top and looked out, and I pulled up beside her and watched her face instead of the view. She said after a while, "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." I said, "Yeah." She said, "How often do you come up here?" I said, "Not often enough." She turned and looked at me, and I made myself look at the view instead, because something in her expression was more than I was ready to handle. We stayed up there an hour. We talked more than I had talked with anyone in recent memory, about the ranch, the cattle operation, the town. She told me about Abilene, about her grandfather's small farm where she'd spent summers. She talked about it the way you talk about something that's gone, with warmth and clean sadness. No bitterness. I listened to everything. On the ride back, she said, "Thank you for bringing me up here." I said, "Yeah, I didn't say I was bringing you anywhere. We were checking the fence line." She laughed. And something happened to my face that the corner of my mouth was involved in. Something I was going to pretend had not occurred. Hank saw us come back into the yard. He didn't say a single word. He just smiled at the middle distance. I have not forgiven him for that. Before we get to what happens next, if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. And leave a comment telling me your favorite moment in this story so far. I'll leave a heart on yours. November arrived. The mornings went cold, and the kitchen smelled like wood smoke and dried chilies, and something warm I had no business finding as comforting as I did. Not 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I had a long, grinding meeting at the county bank about a property line dispute that had dragged on for 3 years. I drove back to the ranch in a mood the hands recognized immediately and gave wide berth to. 10 minutes after I sat down in my private room, there was a knock on the door. Clear and deliberate. I said, "Yes." The door opened. Ellie stood there with a cup of coffee in each hand, the most nervous I had ever seen her. She said, "Martha told me to check on you." I said, "Martha should mind her own business." She said, "She also said you'd say that." She came in and set one cup on the desk and held the other, and did not leave. She said, "Bad meeting?" I said, "Long one." She said, "The east property line thing? Hank mentioned it. That sounds exhausting." Something about that word landed differently than I expected. People said frustrating, complicated. These things take time. Exhausting was the accurate one. I said, "Sit down." She sat in the chair across from the desk, the one nobody had ever sat in. She held her coffee with both hands and waited. And I told her the whole thing. The survey from 1987, the access dispute, 3 different lawyers. She listened completely, asking exactly the right questions. At the end, she said, "What happens if you just move the fence 200 feet and let them have it?" I said, "It's my land." She said, "I know, but what happens, specifically?" I said, after a moment, "The north access route stays mine. The East Creek boundary stays mine. So the 200 feet in question is mostly brush and one old stock tank that's been dry for 4 years." She said, "So you'd be giving up 200 feet of brush and a dry tank to end 3 years of legal fees and exhausting meetings." A pause. "I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying what the math is." I had thought about this from every angle. Nobody had said it that simply. I said, "You're not what I expected." She said, "What did you expect?" I said, "Quiet, agreeable, someone who wouldn't come back in this room." She almost smiled. I tried not coming back, but Martha told me to knock, and you can't argue with Martha. I said, "Nobody can argue with Martha." And I laughed. I don't do that. The hands know it. The county knows it. Wade Calloway does not laugh, but this was an actual laugh, out loud, in my private room. Oh, and I could not retrieve it or pretend it hadn't happened. She looked surprised for just a second. Then she smiled. Wide, warm, completely unguarded. And something in my chest that had been holding itself carefully in place for weeks came loose all at once. She had no business being that real. People around me were usually careful. She was not careful at all. She was just herself, without apology, in my private room, saying the right words. I said quietly, "Thank you for the coffee." She said, "Anytime." I called the lawyer the next morning and told him to redraw the east line. After Thanksgiving dinner, when the hands had gone and Martha was in the kitchen, I found Ellie on the back porch in the dark, looking out at the fields. The stars were out. November in Texas, the stars are something particular. As I came out and stood beside her and said nothing for a while. Then I said, "You planning on staying?" Not a question. She said after a pause, "Is that an offer?" I said, "I don't make offers I haven't thought about." She turned and looked at me in the dark. I could feel the quality of the silence shift, the way it does when something changes between two people and both of them know it. She said, "Then yes, I'm planning on staying." I said, "Good." We stood there until the cold drove us inside. December. 3 days before Christmas, I drove into Merritt and came back with a small thing wrapped in brown paper, a silver photo frame, a way of saying something I wasn't ready to say out loud. I left it on the kitchen counter with her name on it. She put it on the windowsill with a photograph of her grandfather's farm in Abilene. I saw it every morning with the coffee. On Christmas Eve, she knocked on my private room door. She came in with 2 glasses and a bottle of something, and sat in the chair across from the desk and said, "I thought maybe we could have a drink." I said, "I reckon we could." We sat there until late, the fire low, the ranch quiet around us. She told me about her first real Christmas memory at her grandfather's farm. I told her about my father, about the ridge, and what he said to me when I was 6, about the belt buckle in the glass case, which had been his. He'd won it in Amarillo in 1967 and given it to me the year he died. She said quietly, "He sounds like someone worth being like." I said, "I'm working on it." She looked at me and said nothing. The fire was down to coals, the ranch completely quiet. I said, "Ellie," she said. "Oh, yeah." I said, "I want you to stay, not as kitchen staff, not on Martha's authorization. I want you to stay because this ranch makes more sense with you in it than it ever did without you. And I am not interested in going back to the version of it where you weren't here." She said, "Wade Calloway, are you asking me to stay?" I said, "I believe I just did." She said, "On the ranch, permanently, with me." A pause. "If that's something you want." She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "You know I walked into your private room by accident on my first day." I said, "I know," she said. "And you said don't come back in here." I said, "I know," she said softly. "I'm real glad I didn't listen." I said, "So am I." She said yes, simply and directly, the same way she did everything. I reached across and took her hand, and she held on to it, and we stayed until the fire went cold. We were married the following April, on a Saturday afternoon in the South pasture, with the fields green behind us and the sky that particular Texas blue. Martha cried, which she will deny. Hank gave a toast that was 3 sentences long, and every word was right. Garrison wore a ribbon Ellie put on him herself and behaved with more dignity than anyone had a right to expect. Everyone had thought when she walked into my private room that first rainy Thursday that she was doomed. The new girl who'd knocked on the wrong door, broken the rule nobody broke, stood dripping on the floor of the most off-limits room on the Calloway Ranch. Everyone assumed she'd be gone in a week. They were wrong. I was wrong. Boy, the most correct thing that ever happened on this property was a woman with a broken umbrella walking through the wrong door on a rainy night and standing her ground when a man twice her size stared at her without saying a word. She walked into my private room, a stranger. She became the only person I have ever wanted in it. She put her grandfather's photograph on the kitchen windowsill next to my morning coffee, made Garrison gentle, made me, without asking for any of it, exactly the man my father built this ranch to produce. I never told anyone this until now. But that first night, when she stood in the puddle from her own boots and looked at the rodeo buckle and said it reminded her of her grandfather. I already knew. Not everything, not what it would become, but something. I could feel it the way you feel weather changing, when in the air, in the light, in some specific quality of the quiet. I had one rule about my private room. Nobody went in there. She broke it. And I have thanked God for that broken rule every single day since. If this story got to you, leave a comment below telling me your favorite moment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll leave a heart on every comment. This ranch has never been quieter, and it has never been fuller, and I wouldn't change a single thing.